Hi. This is not a story anyone expected you to hear. It was held back, organized, and stored where only certain people could review it. Not because it was unbelievable, but because it made people ask things they were not ready to answer. If you are curious, keep listening. Everything you need is in the timeline. The record begins here. My name is Robert Kell. I am a senior district ranger, assigned to the West Fork sector of the Bitterroot Range in western Montana. I have been in service for 16 years. My jurisdiction covers roughly 32 miles of timber, ridge, and alpine meadow, from the Sailway Ridgeline down to the old fuel break near Horse Creek. My authority is administrative and emergency. My duty is to keep people alive long enough to get them out. The Bitterroot is old country, timber that grows in straight lines for 100 paces, then bends for no reason the map will show. Snow that falls in October and lingers until late June. The kind of cold that teaches you to finish sentences fast. I have worked wildfire. I have handled missing hunters. I have put down injured wildlife when we had no vet on call. None of that is why I am speaking now. I have learned that some places do not need to be defended from human accidents. They need to be defended from something that treats human accidents as invitations. We have rules to keep accidents from becoming doors. That is the first thing I want you to understand. In the fall of 2015, a man named Caleb Mercer went missing near Granite Notch. He was 27. He was hiking off the formal trail. His girlfriend reported him overdue at dusk. We rode out at dawn. By noon, we found his pack and his phone in a clearing. No blood, no tracks, no struggle. The ground was clean, too clean. I remember kneeling and brushing away pine needles. Underneath, the soil was tamped flat in a way that made no sense. For elk or bear, that was my first year in this district. I did not know the rules yet. Caleb never came back. We listed him as a disappearance due to exposure. That is what we write when the truth would cause more harm than good. Exposure implies weather. Exposure does not imply that he spoke from the tree line in his own voice 2 days later and asked us to follow custom trail markers that do not exist on any map. We did not follow. That was the rule. I did not understand why then. I only understood that the deputy supervisor told me quietly not to answer when a voice called from uphill. After disappearance, never uphill. Never follow a request to look up. I have come to believe that rule is incomplete. It keeps you alive, but it does not prevent the thing behind it from learning how to ask differently. I am speaking out of order. I should begin where the ridgeline changed for me. The ridgeline is the border. Past the ridgeline, anything upright is not human. That is what we say now. We did not say it 10 years ago. We only implied it with paperwork and missing person codes. My days were simple at first. Drive the service road, check the trailheads, lug the camp permits, check out after dark, radio discipline, freeze warnings, routine, all of it designed to give the impression that we were custodians of recreational land. The truth was that our custodianship was containment. Keep people below certain elevations. After certain hours, you give the public a reason. Elk migration, timber restoration, controlled burn risk. Nobody questions that. Nobody pushes. The ridge line is not a line on a map. It shifts with snow melt and wind and the movements of whatever lies above tree line. We tracked it by absence. Birds would not cross. Coyotes would bark and then go silent. Mid-sound, that silence is a marker. It sounds like nothing. It feels like pressure under the sternum. When the silence holds longer than 10 seconds, we mark the ridge line. For that week, people who have not worked isolation underestimate how little time it takes for rules to feel normal. After 2 seasons, I could tell when the ridge line was close. without looking at the sky. The air tasted metallic. My tongue would feel dry, even after water. I never spoke about that. With the new ranges, you do not explain sensations. You wait until they notice them on their own. My sector had 4 primary rules. In those years, Rule 1, do not answer a voice that call from uphill after dusk. Rule 2, do not let a separated party member walk uphill alone for any reason. Rule 3, if you must cross the ridgeline, do not acknowledge anything that stands. Rule 4, if you hear your own name spoken from behind you, keep walking until you reach the marker post or sunrise, whichever comes first. There were more rules, but those 4 were the ones we said out loud to new hires. The rest were implicit. Do not camp off the late freeze. Do not track footprints that begin in open ground. Do not follow a path that is straighter than it should be. We learned some rules late. We learned some by accident. We learned one by listening, and another by ignoring the radio. You asked for escalation, but escalation did not feel sudden then. It came like rot in a beam. Quiet, steady, only obvious once the structure creaked. My closest partner in those years was Ranger Sarah Miles. She had 10 years on me. She was quiet, in a way I mistook for confidence. Later I learned it was fear practiced into routine. Routine is how we survive. She told me once that fear keeps you alert, but routine keeps you alive. I did not appreciate that distinction until the winter after the Ridge Creek incident. I am still avoiding the beginning. I do not want to recount Ridge Creek, but I must. Ridge Creek was midsummer 2019. The snowpack melted late. The ridgeline held at lower elevation than usual. That meant more day hikers drifted close without knowing. That meant more interventions. Interventions are what we call polite redirects. You see a party getting too high on the slope. You warn them about loose shale or late storm risk. You offer to guide them to a safer stream crossing. They listen because your uniform implies you know better. That is the part the entity exploits. Human rules, human trust. On a Tuesday, near the end of July, dispatch notified us of an overdue father and daughter. Their vehicle was at Trailhead 7. They had checked out at 5 in the morning, intending to summit a minor peak. They were 11 hours overdue. Weather was clear. No medical history reported. No reason for delay. We rode out at dusk. That was the first violation. Rule 0 is unspoken. Do not search uphill after dusk. But family compels exceptions. I said family. That must seem irrelevant. At the time, it did not. The overdue party was Mark and Emily Rain. Mark taught my brother in high school woodshop. Emily was 12. I recognized their vehicle before dispatch read the plate. Compassion is not a mistake until it intersects with the ridge line. Sarah argued we should wait until morning. I argued we would lose heat signatures, signs of passage, fade fast, in alpine wind. She said something was wrong with the air. I tasted metal and agreed, but did not stop. We went up. That was the first true violation. We found them 2 miles past the formal trail on a narrow meadow shelf. Tent collapsed, stove and fired, packs zipped. No signs of panic. It looked like they set camp, lay down, and never got up. But there were no bodies, only impressions in the grass where bodies had been. 2 long impressions, 1 short. I remember that because the short one was too short for Emily, maybe a child of 5. No record of a child in the party. Sarah whispered, "Do not speak. Do not count. Counting makes it notice." I did not understand. I counted anyway. 3 impressions. She flinched, like I had struck her. That is how rules are enforced among us. not by authority, but by fear of consequence. The trees uphill shifted, not wind, movement, something standing between trunks, where no path should exist. I saw the outline, human height, maybe taller, shoulders narrow, legs too long. It did not step. It tilted, as if considering the angle of descent. Sa touched my arm. Do not acknowledge. That is rule 3. I looked away. The thing clicked. The sound was like a day, testing dry brush, but sharper, intelligent. We backed down slope, without turning. Our radios stayed quiet. At the marker post, by the switchback, Sa finally breathed. She told me quietly that the third impression meant they had answered something. You get 3 impressions when someone follows a voice that is not really there. The extra belongs to the one who invited. I asked, who invites? She did not answer. We filed a missing persons report. Exposure. Likely fall. That was administrative fiction. The truth was that we looked uphill after dusk for a child. That was not on the permit. That was the hook. Compassion is always the hook. 3 days later, dispatch recorded a call at 0300 hours. The caller identified as Emily. She asked for rescue. She said her father was hurt. She described a ridge we do not have. She asked us to retrace the meadow route and to hurry. Her voice was thin, like she was calling from behind fabric. Sarah listened, with her hand over her mouth. Emily had been declared deceased. By then, we had told the family that no remains were recovered. We had not told them about the impressions. I spoke into the radio. Emily, say your location. She exhaled. A soft cry. Not pain. Not fear. Something between. A pause. That felt like recognition. She said my name. Carefully. Exact pronunciation. Nobody teaches a 12-year-old to say Kell with that flat sound. She told me to look uphill. The ridgeline was quiet. Too quiet. Sarah slapped the radio off. Hard. Her eyes were wet. She told me rule 4. If it knows your name, do not listen. Keep walking until sunrise. Radios count as listening. I asked, what happens if you do? She did not answer. We endured 6 minutes of silence. At sunrise, the ridgeline receded. Birds resumed. That was the sign. It was over. Temporary. The administrative fallout was predictable. Search suspended. Due to terrain. Family provided. Grief liaison. We filed incident notes. For internal review. Operationally, things stabilized. Fewer hikers. Lower ridgeline. Quiet days. That quiet was our false stabilization. It lasted 2 months. In late September, the ridgeline surged. That is not official language, but it fits. Silence spread lower. Coyotes refused to cross fire roads. We saw upright shapes in clearings at noon. They did not move. They did not chase. They stood until noticed, then disappeared. On blink. It was not aggression. It was reconnaissance. Sarah told me the entity was learning our rules. I asked how she knew. She said it used to mimic only voices. Now it mimicked posture. Human stand. To signal intent. Intent attracts attention. Attention opens the door. Our supervisor, Deputy District Chief Mayes, called a closed briefing. Attendance was mandatory. He spoke like a man, announcing a flood forecast. Dry. Procedural. No speculation. He introduced a new rule. Rule 5. If you see more than one upright shape above the ridgeline, retreat. Without confirming. I asked what confirming meant. He said, looking longer than 1 second. That winter, we lost Ranger Perry. To confirming. He froze. Binoculars up. Sarah shouted his name. He did not lower the glass. His breath fogged and stopped. When we reached him, his eyes were open, pupils wide. He was alive, but not conscious. He breathed shallow, full 3 hours, then died. In the chopper, the coroner listed, cardiac arrest. That is what you write when you have no words for what actually happened. I am recounting faster than I intended. This is how the memory wants to be told. In jumps, in breaches. The part I have avoided is where I broke rule 2, because I believed the entity was someone I loved. My brother Liam visited in early spring 2020. Snow still deep on the north slopes. We kept him below the ridgeline. We warned him about cougars and cold. We did not mention voices. That is institutional cruelty, disguised as kindness. He asked to hike to the old lookout. I agreed. That was my failure. He moved faster uphill than we did. Young legs, fresh lungs. At the first switchback, he was already beyond voice range. That triggered rule 2. Do not let a separated party walk uphill alone. But he laughed and waved and said he would wait. At the saddle, Sa told me to call him back. I tried. He ignored, not out of malice, out of confidence. Confidence dies fastest. In the alpine, we hurried. Snow softened underfoot. Silence grew. I tasted metal. I knew the ridgeline was near. We found him at the saddle, or what we thought was him. He stood upright, facing the tree line. His coat was wrong. Same color, but longer cut. Not Liam's style. His hair was right. His posture was exact. He spoke, without turning. He said my name, the way Emily had. Careful, flat, precise. He asked me to help him down. He said he felt dizzy. He sounded like Liam. If you stripped out the warmth. I stepped forward. Sa grabbed my sleeve. Do not acknowledge. That is rule 3. But rule 3 collides with family. I stepped anyway. That was the second true violation. Compassion, not arrogance, not ignorance. Compassion. He turned then, face like Liam, eyes wrong, too dark, no white. He blinked slowly. He asked if Mom was still waiting at the cabin. Our mother had never seen this cabin. She had never been to Montana. That detail broke the illusion. I felt my throat close. I whispered no. He tilted his head. The tilt was too far, more like a bird considering a bright object. He said, that was a shame. Then he walked uphill, into the tree line. Not fast, not slow, just wrong. No sound of snow under boots, no sway of arms. I followed. That was not a decision. That was instinct. Sa tackled me at the threshold. Hard. We tumbled downslope. I screamed his name, not the thing's name. Liam's, my real brother, was nowhere on that mountain. I knew that. My mind knew that. My heart did not. The tree line swallowed the figure. Snow fell from branches, though no branch moved. Silence pressed down. Sa held me until my lungs hurt. She whispered rule 4. If it uses your family, you do not follow. You wait until sunrise. We waited until sunrise. The ridgeline receded. We hiked down without speaking. That night, I called my brother. He answered from his apartment in Boise, alive, confused. He asked how the cabin was. I asked, what cabin? He asked if Mom liked the view. I dropped the phone. I have thought about that moment. 4 years. The entity does not need to kill, to harm. It only needs to blur. It learned my connections. It learned my obligations. It learned that duty and compassion are the same weakness. In uniform, this is where escalation truly began. Not with blood, with knowledge. It knew how to make us open the door. I did not sleep. The night after the saddle, my window looked north, toward the ridge. The snow line gleamed. In the moonlight, it looked peaceful. Peace is misleading. In alpine country, peace is just what comes. Before weather, or before something older than weather decides it wants to be noticed. In the morning, Deputy Chief Mayors called a quiet meeting. Not formal, not in the office. We met at the maintenance shed. 6 of us. No minutes. No uniforms. Mayors told us the ridgeline had pushed lower. Overnight, he tapped a map with a screwdriver. A new line drawn in grease pencil. It cut across recreational access and bisected 3 unofficial campsite clusters. He said we would close those access points for a week, maybe 2. Official reason was late snowpack instability. Unofficial reason was that too many things had been seen standing upright above the maca pines. Nobody argued. You do not argue with containment. Containment is never about truth. It is about minimizing contact long enough to survive the season. After the meeting, Sal lit a cigarette and offered me one. I never smoked before that day. I took one anyway. Routine makes fear tolerable. She said I had to tell Mayes what happened at the saddle. I said there was nothing to tell that he could put in a report. She asked if I heard my brother's voice or if I merely saw the shape. I said both. She nodded. That was confirmation enough for her. She told me a rule I had not heard before. Rule 6. Do not describe its face in full sentences. I asked why. She said, if you give it language, you give it shape. If you give it shape, you give it permission. I thought she was being poetic. She was not. The next 2 weeks were quiet in the operational sense. Few hikers, no lost permits, no overdue calls. The silence was the false stabilization. Administrators love stabilization. It looks like success. It smells like efficiency. May has filed positive metrics with the regional office. They congratulated him for reducing backcountry incidents. The entity used that quiet to adjust. It learned the cadence of our radio checks. It learned the distances between trail cameras. We only realized this after the camera audit. 12 cameras, each motion activated, each set to capture on movement. For 3 weeks, they captured no images. At night, not day, not elk, not wind. Absolute absence. We found hair on one camera housing. Long, pale, not human, not fey, something between. The lab listed it as unidentified mammalian. The lab had no category. For ancient. On the 20th of April, dispatch received an emergency beacon ping. 3 backpackers, university students, from Missoula, beacon flagged, near Granite Notch. That alone was strange. Granite Notch had been quiet since Caleb Mercer. Quiet is worse than noise. Noise means life. Quiet means the ridge line is listening. Sarah and I went out with Perry's replacement, Ranger Holt, 1 year out of academy. Smart, confident, not yet afraid. In the correct way. Fear has types. Holt had fear of error. He had not developed fear of entity. That only comes after personal contact. We reached the notch at 1900 hours. Beacon light blinked on a boulder. Tent upright. Packs closed. No sign of struggle. No sign of wildlife. No boot prints. Leading away. Only boot prints. Leading in. 3 sets. They stopped at the tent. That was it. No return angle. No wondering. No confusion. 3 straight lines inward. Like vector arrows. I called out. Standard procedure. Name the party. Identify authority. Offer medical assistance. No response. Holt circled the tent. He froze. He pointed at something on the canvas. Handprints. Child-sized. 6 or 7 at least. Pressed from the inside. Pressed outward. Fingers long. Not right for a child. Not right for anything human. The tent rustled. Not wind. Something moved. From inside to outside. Without unzipping. Canvas bulged. Then settled. Nothing emerged. Holt pulled his sidearm. Sarah shook her head. Do not escalate. That is not a written rule. But it is a rule. The entity interprets hostility as invitation. We waited. Silence pooled. The ridgeline was nay. I could taste metal. My tongue felt numb. The air cooled. Without wind. That cooling means proximity. Sarah whispered. Rule 3. Do not acknowledge anything upright. I scanned the tree line. Nothing stood. Yet the rule applied. She sensed what I did not. Holt whispered back. Upright what? Sarah did not answer. At 19:30, we made the call to withdraw and radio for daybreak search. That was standard. After ridge contact, as we descended, Holt asked if we were just leaving them. I said we were not leaving. We were waiting. He did not like that answer. Compassion breeds confrontation. Confrontation breeds violation. At the marker post, our radios crackled. Static first, then a voice. Male. Young. Scared. He identified as Lucas, one of the backpackers. He said his friends were asleep. He asked if we could take him down. Voice was breathy. Too breathy. 4 healthy lungs. Like someone whispering. Through gauze. Sarah covered her MIC with her sleeve. Do not answer. I asked why. She said rule 1. Do not answer uphill. After dusk. Holt said it was not dusk. On his watch. I looked at the sky. It was dusk. By any practical definition. Ridge time is not clock time. Lucas asked again. He asked for water. He said he was cold. Holt put his hand on the radio. I grabbed his wrist. Soft. Enough to stop him. He pulled away. He said we cannot ignore a kid freezing in a tent. That was compassion. That was the hook. The voice shifted. Subtle. Lucas said our names. Holt first. Then mine. Then Sarah. Correct pronunciations. Perfect cadence. The ridge does not know ranks or titles. It only knows names. Sarah whispered rule 4. If it knows your name, keep walking. Holt froze. He asked how it knew his name. I said it heard dispatch. That was a lie. Dispatch did not broadcast names. The entity learned by listening. It always listens. We walked. At the second switchback, the voice changed again. It cried. Not convincingly. Too rhythmic. Like an animal. Imitating pain. Holt slowed. I pushed him forward. He said we could not just abandon them. I said we were not abandoning. We were waiting for day. He said day would be too late. At the trailhead, the voice cut off. Birds resumed. Air warmed. Ridgeline receded. That is the clock of our world. Daybreak. We hiked back. Tent was gone. Pack's gone. Beacon gone. The ground was tamped flat. No prints. No blood. No bodies. Only a scrap of nylon. Caught on a branch. Pale green. Synthetic. Cut clean. Not torn. We reported 3 disappearances. Exposure. Hypothermia. Weather. Administrative fiction. Parents came. Grieved. Asked if they suffered. We said no. We lied. Holt changed after that. Fear shifted. From error to entity. That was good. He needed the correct Fae. But correct Fae does not guarantee survival. 2 weeks later, he violated Rule 2. That was not his fault alone. The ridgeline exploits. Chain of command. We received a call from Boundary Patrol. Hunters had spotted an injured hiker below the saddle. Daylight. Good visibility. Weather stable. We mobilized. Holt moved ahead. He saw the hiker first. Male. Mid-40s. Blood on pant leg. Leaning against a stump. He waved. Asked for help. Tone was steady. Not distressed enough. Sarah whispered to me. Upright. Do not acknowledge. Holt did not hear her. He jogged forward. Compassion. Duty. The ridge knows those words better than we do. I shouted. Halt. Wait. He did not. The injured hiker lifted his head. Eyes black. No sclera. He smiled. Slow. Teeth too even. Speech too calm. He asked for elevation stats. That detail makes no sense. For a wounded man, elevation is what matters. To the ridge. Above a threshold, it can hunt. Below, it can only observe. Holt reached for his tourniquet. The figure stood. Height increased. Vertebrae elongated. Not fast. Not violent. Just inevitable. Holt stumbled backward. I shouted Rule 3. Do not acknowledge anything upright. Too late. Saw fired a flay at the ground. That is improvisational containment. Light confuses it. Color confuses it. Smoke interrupts. Line of sight. The figure tilted. Then crooked. Then stepped backward. Into shadow. Not into brush. Into shadow. The shadow folded. Around it. Holt ran downslope. Without coordination. He fell twice. We caught him. At the marker post. He was shaking. He asked what that was. I said do not ask. Asking makes it real. That is not a rule. That is a kindness. We filed the report. Injured hiker. Self-evacuated. No contact. Administrative fiction. After that incident, May is convened. Another shed meeting. He introduced a new rule. Rule 7. Do not render medical assistance above the ridgeline without confirming vitals. That sounds rational. It is not. Confirming vitals requires contact. Contact is invitation. Rule 7 is misleading by design. It protects liability more than life. We obey anyway. Institutions are slow to admit the supernatural. They reframe until language breaks. That summer, a wildfire sparked. In the west draw, dry lightning. Standard hazard. Incident command mobilized. Crews deployed. That should have been routine. The fire never crossed the ridge line. Flames hit the boundary and bent, not away, up, like a sheet, against glass. We watched through binoculars. Sparks climbed, then vanished midday. The entity does not burn. Fire cannot cross its terrain. That is its limitation. One of them, Incident Command, could not understand why the fire stalled. They requested aerial imaging. The imaging returned. Corrupted. Not black. Not warped. Overexposed. In vertical streaks. Like the film had been dragged upward. During capture, tech blamed. Heat distortion. We knew better. Part of me began to believe we could use that limitation. Fire as boundary. Fire as rule. That was arrogance. Disguised as strategy. The ridge punishes arrogance. August 2020. Overnight storm. Microburst winds. Toppled 50 trees. Trail access compromised. We closed the area. That should have kept the public out. It did not. A family of 4 bypassed the closure. Tourists. Summer visitors. From out of state. 2 parents. 2 boys. Ages 8 and 11. They wanted photos of wildflowers. I intercepted them near the old lookout spur. I redirected them. Explained weather risk. They argued. Tourists believe. Park rules are suggestions. The ridge loves tourists. They resist authority. Resistance opens doors. While I argued with the parents, the older boy wandered upslope. He saw something. He pointed. He waved. He said, look. His voice was cheerful. No fear. That is how it always begins. With children, the ridge does not frighten them. At first, it invites. I followed his gaze. Uphill. Tree line. A shape. Upright. Thin. Taller than average. Not moving. That violated Rule 3. Do not acknowledge. I forced my eyes down. Too slow. The boy laughed. He said the man was waving. He waved back. Rule 2 violation. Separated party member. Walking uphill. I lunged for him. The shape tilted. The boy stopped laughing. His mouth opened. He whispered something. I could not hear. Then he turned and walked uphill. His stride was wrong. Too steady. Too direct. Children do not walk like that. In uneven terrain. I shouted stop. That was mistake. Voice is climb. Sound is invitation. The father ran after him. Compassion. Duty. The mother screamed. The younger boy cried. All four moved upslope. I yelled for them to freeze. They did not. Sarah arrived. From the spur. She grabbed the mother. Held her. She yelled at me. To get the father. I ran. Terrain sloped. Brush tore. At my uniform. I caught the father's backpack. He shrugged out of it. People shed equipment. When chased, they shed survival. He reached the tree line. The boy vanished. Between trunks. Not running. Just gone. The shape stood in the gap. It mimicked the boy's posture. Then it stepped back and elongated. The father shouted his son's name. He shouted again. The shape whispered. Not the boy's voice. Not anyone's voice. A scraping sound. Like wind. Through metal pipe. The father followed. We recovered them. At sunrise. Only the parents. And the younger boy. They were found. At the switchback. Hypothermic. Shoes missing. Socks wet. No injuries. No memory. They asked where their oldest son was. They asked if he was still picking flowers. We told them. We were searching. We lied. We searched. For 9 days. No remains. No clothing. Nothing. The coroner listed. Probable animal predation. Administrative fiction. The family left Montana. Their grief liaison sent us an email thanking us for our professionalism. Professionalism is cruelty in uniform. After that, I lost any belief in containment. You cannot contain what learns faster than you can legislate. The ridge was no longer a boundary. It was an observer. It was studying its prey. Secondary pressure came from outside the field. Dispatch wanted clearer guidelines. Administration wanted lower incident rates. Regional office wanted positive metrics. Families wanted buddies. Nobody wanted the truth. Truth breaks funding. Truth breaks tourism. Truth breaks the unspoken contract. That wilderness is neutral. My sister called. During this period, she asked if I was coming home. For Thanksgiving, she asked if I was okay. She said I sounded tired. I said I was fine. I lied. My voice shook. She asked if I had been overworking. I said yes. She said she heard wind. On the line, there was no wind. Silence generates its own sound. A week later, she sent a voicemail. She said she had a dream where I called her from a cabin. She said Mom was there. She said I sounded afraid. She asked if something happened. Dreams are not part of procedure. I deleted the message. In October, Mays received a regional memo requesting trail reopening to boost visitor numbers. Before winter, we argued. He said no. Regional insisted. They cited metrics. Metrics do not recognize ridge lines. Metrics do not recognize entities older than measurement. We reopened. 3 access points. Day use only. No camping. That should have limited risk. It did not. On the second weekend, 2 fishermen crossed into upper elevation. They returned at dusk. They looked fine. They talked to me. At the trailhead. Casual. Functional. They said they heard elk bugle. Elk do not bugle. In October, at that elevation, they filed out. They waved. They drove away. 7 hours later, a trooper found their truck idling at the county line. Headlights on. No occupants. Driver's side door open. Fishing poles in the bed. No sign of struggle. No sign of prints. Both men missing. Their families demanded answers. We had none. False stabilization collapsed. Regional rescinded. The reopening order. Too late. Once the ridge. Hesitation. Boundaries mean nothing. I need to speak. About the thing. That happened in November. The systemic failure. The ridgeline crust. Into our jurisdiction fully. Not just silence. Not just shapes. Full contact. It began. With radio bleed. Dispatch reported. Hearing voices. During routine check. Voices spoke. In cadence. Not English. Not any language. I know. Like a chant. Without rhythm. Acoustic pressure. Made static vibrate. Tech blamed. Antenna malfunction. Then the voices. Use call signs. Correct. Current. Then they asked. For elevation stats. Again elevation. Always elevation. Because elevation. Decides agency. We shut down radio. For 1 hour. That is unheard of. In emergency service. But vulnerability. Was worse. No contact. Is safer. Than compromised contact. At 1900 hours. Snow began. Heavy. Wet. We initiated closure. Last hikers evac. By snowmobile. 1 party of 3. Refused evac. Adult couple. Teenage girl. They insisted. They knew the trail. They insisted. They would reach. Their vehicle. Before full dark. They were wrong. At 2000 hours. We mounted rescue. Rule 0. Broken again. Families override rules. We found their boot prints. At switchback. 3 sets. Then 4. The 4th set. Smaller. Barefoot. Toes pointed forward. No heel strike. Walking in snow. Without sink. Snow refused. To compress. Under those prints. That was new. Micro variation. The entity. Never mimicked footprints. Before. The prints led. To the saddle. Visibility low. Wind sideways. Snow like static. Then we heard crying. Female. Young. Not the teenage girl. A younger child. Maybe 5. The age. Of that hypothetical. Third impression. That age recurred. Patterns. Our warnings. Sarah whispered. Do not answer. Holt asked. If maybe there was. A lost kid. I said. There are no kids. In November. On that ridge. Holt did not argue. Growth. From correct Faye. We found the family. At the second marker post. Kneeling. Facing uphill. Eyes closed. Hands clasped. Like prayer. Snow piled. On their backs. They were alive. Rigid. Skin cold. Not hypothermic. Not dead. Suspended. In between. Then the crying stopped. Air stilled. Silence closed. That silence carries its own weight. The ridgeline descended. I tasted metal. Hard. Blood in the gums. My eyes watered. Holt whispered. It is close. Sarah said. Do not speak. Footsteps crunched. Behind us. Light. Childlike. I did not turn. Rule 1. Never turn. To uphill voice. After dusk. But footsteps are not voice. Loophole. It exploits loopholes. I felt breath. Near my neck. Warm. That made no sense. Ridge cold. Does not produce. Warm breath. Something whispered. My name. Perfect. Exact. I did not respond. The teenage girl gasped. Her eyes opened. She looked past us. She whispered. Mom. The woman lifted her head. She smiled. Soft. Gentle. Then she walked uphill. Not toward her daughter. Toward the tree line. The father followed. No hesitation. No resistance. The teenage girl screamed. Holt grabbed her. She fought. She begged. Compassion. But compassion, held by Holt, prevented a greater violation. The mother and father disappeared into shadow. Snow filled the gap. We carried the girl down. Sunrise. Ridge receded. She survived. She remembers nothing. She calls her parents missing. Administrative fiction. Replaced by ambiguity. The ridge line. Proved escalation. It could split families. Without killing. It could insert footprints. It could mimic breath. It could exploit. Chain of command. Institutional behavior. Broke next. Regional demanded. An after-action report. May is sanitized. Dispatch withheld. Radio logs. We falsified. Weather on set times. We all lied. Not to protect reputation. To prevent panic. Panic brings bodies. Bodies bring entity. I need to speak. About SARS loss. It matters. It matters. Because it shows how rules fail. Even the most disciplined. December. Early. Wind sharp. Snow granular. Ridgeline dormant. 4 weeks. False stabilization. Again. Sarah received a voicemail from her sister. Sister said she was visiting unexpectedly. Said she was already driving. Said she would arrive by evening. Sarah lit a cigarette. She was shaking. I asked what was wrong. She said her sister had been dead for 3 years. Car accident. No survivors. Cremation. No burial. I asked if she was sure. It was her voice. She nodded. Exact cadence. Exact breath. Even the cough. Between words. That detail is how the ridge invites. Personal. Precise. It uses grief. Like oxygen. At dusk. Headlights approached. Our cabin. Vehicle stopped. Engine idle. Door opened. Footsteps. Sarah froze. I whispered Rule 3. Do not acknowledge anything upright. But grief is immune to rule. A female voice called her name. Soft. Warm. Full sentences. That violates another unwritten rule. The ridge speaks in fragments. When it uses full sentences, it intends to take. Sarah stepped outside. I blocked the door. She shoved me harder than I expected. She screamed, "Let me see her." I said, "That was not her." She said, "I did not know." She said, "I never lost blood." She was right. Lost changes. Rule compliance. A silhouette stood by the pines. Height matched human. Shoulders narrow. Posture familiar. Too familiar. Sarah sobbed. She called her sister's name. The silhouette beckoned. One motion. Crooked finger. That motion is older than language. It is how predators ask prey to come closer. She ran. I followed. Rule violation. By both. Not duty. Love. That is the worst reason. The silhouette vanished. Behind a trunk. Sarah slowed. She said she could hear her. I could hear nothing. She reached the tree. She turned. Eyes wide. She whispered, "It sounds like her." Then something pulled her upward. Not by limbs. By gravity reversed. She rose. 3 feet. Spun. Snow spiraled. She screamed once. Then silence. Snow fell. Soft. Innocent. There was no body. Only an indent. In snow. Where she stood. And one small bay footprint. Beside it. Child-sized. I crawled to the tree. I whispered her name. No answer. The ridgeline hummed. Not sound. Pressure. I waited until sunrise. Rule 4. Then I walked down. Alone. Institutional response was predictable. Missing. Exposure. Hypothermia. Administrative fiction. But Holt knew. Dispatch knew. Mays knew. We crossed from containment into attrition. By winter's end, morale collapsed. We rotated shifts to minimize night exposure. We considered closing the entire district. Regional refused. Money and metrics held the line. Longer than procedure. That was systemic failure. When institutions value perception over survival, the ridge wins. Without moving. I have more to tell, but not yet. The next part is the fire line test. And what came after? Winter pressed harder. That year, the ridge line stayed low, snow buried, the trail markers. Silence lingered, longer each morning. Silence is the only honest indicator. We have radios, sensors, administrative models. All fail. Under the ridge, silence never lies. In January, Mayers called me into the office. He shut the blinds. He spoke quietly. He said regional was pressing for a spring pilot program. Controlled access. Above the saddle. Limited permits. Guided only. He said they wanted to show the public that the backcountry remains safe. Safe is a financial category, not a biological one. I asked, why now? He said numbers. Declining visits. Declining revenue. Rising inquiries from outdoor groups. Pressure from legislators. Those forces are older than any ridge. Bureaucracy does not respect entities. Older than language. I told Mayers we could not guarantee safety. He said we did not need to guarantee safety. We needed to demonstrate supervision. Procedure exists to create the illusion of control. That night, I considered resignation. Resignation is a form of containment failure. If we leave, regional replaces us with people who do not know the rules. Ignorance kills faster than the ridge. I stayed. Duty is just fair. With structure. February. Wind cut. Across the canyon. Dispatch reported. No hikers. No skiers. No snowshoers. Quiet. Too quiet. Silence spread. Down to the fuel break. That had never happened. In my 16 years. The ridge line was testing boundaries. It must learn. By probing. Holt and I rode the snowmobiles. For patrol. No signs of wildlife. Not even tracks. Animals know when to hide. We reached the saddle. At midday. Light bright. Air still. Silence complete. Holt whispered. It feels like it is listening. I nodded. Do not speak. Above whisper. In silence. That is not a written rule. That is instinct. We dismounted. We checked the abandoned camera stations. One camera was missing. Another recorded a single frame. At 3 in the morning. An upright shape. On the ridge. Height estimated. Over 8 feet. Shoulders narrow. Head tilted. Exposure blur. Suggested motion. Faster than shutter. Tech flagged the file. Corrupted. Holt asked what we were supposed to do. With evidence. Nobody believed. I said we were not collecting belief. We were collecting warning. On the descent. Holt asked if I ever thought of leaving. I said yes. He asked why I stayed. I said because the ridge is not confined to Montana. He asked how I knew. I said because silence exists in other places. I told him about a ranger in the Cascades who heard his mother calling from above tree line 30 years after she died. I told him about a game warden in New Mexico who found upright tracks in gypsum dunes. None of those reports made national news. They floated in quiet networks, not shared officially, but known enough to imply scale. Beyond jurisdiction. Holt asked if the entity moved. I said no. Movement implies change of location. The ridge does not move. It expands. It shrinks. It listens. It learns. Presence shifts. Like weather, not like travel. In March, the pilot program was finalized. 5 guided tours. Across 2 weeks. 10 hikers each. Daylight only. No minus. No summit attempts. No off-trail access. No radios. For participants. Only guides. Regional called the plan cautious. We called it reckless. But our language does not matter. In their meetings, I was assigned lead guide For the third tour, Holt assistant. 2 other rangers. As sweep. Saw his absence. Weighed heavy. Her name. Was not spoken. Survival duty. Forbids mourning. During escalation. Mourning. Creates hesitation. Hesitation. Creates violation. The first 2 tours. Passed without incident. False stabilization. Again. Participants stayed close. Weather held. No voices. No silence. Beyond normal. Regional reported success. They published an internal brief highlighting our operational excellence. They ignored the fact that silence extended to dusk. On both days, silence at dusk is not normal. That is scouting behavior. On the third tour, we assembled 10 participants at the trailhead. Mixed ages. Fit. Curious. Too curious. Curious. Too curious. Curiosity is a form of compassion. It assumes the unknown deserves attention. The Ridge loves curiosity. We briefed them on terrain and weather. We gave standard safety talk. We omitted the real rules. You cannot tell civilians. Do not answer voices. From uphill, they laugh. They dismiss. They follow instinct. Instinct is death. Above the ridge, we hiked. At 9 in the morning. Snowpack firm. Sky clay. Ridgeline high. But present. Birds flew. But only. Below tree line. Coyotes howled. Then stopped. Silence punctured through. Twice. 5 seconds. 7 seconds. Not enough to mark shift. Enough to warn. Participants asked questions. How high were we going? Would there be wildlife? Was the ridge safe? I told them. Safety was procedural, not absolute. They did not understand. At noon, we reached the meadow shelf. That was as far as the pilot allowed. We stopped for lunch. Holt checked radios. Dispatch stable. Weather clay. Silence absent. On paper. Perfect. Then one participant pointed uphill. He said he saw a figure near the pines. Upright. Still. No motion. He asked if it was another ranger. I said no. I told him to keep his eyes on me. He asked why. I said, do not acknowledge things standing at elevation. He laughed. He looked anyway. Rule 3 violation. Not lethal. Not immediate. But logged. By the ridge. Logging matters. It learns. By tally. The figure vanished. When I blinked. Not faded. Not toned. Gone. Holt whispered. It is scouting us. I nodded. One of the older participants asked if we were in danger. I said danger is always relative. He thought I was being poetic. I was being literal. We descended. At 1300 hours. Ridgeline stayed quiet. False stabilization. Again. At the trailhead. Participants thanked us. They drove off. Regional declared the pilot effective. They began discussion for summer expansion. That night, dispatch called. One of the participants had not returned to his lodge. His wife reported him missing. She said he was not answering his phone. She said he mentioned wanting to take one more look at the ridge. At sunset, we tracked his rental vehicle to turn out for. Door unlocked. Engine cold. Tracks in snow. One set. Uphill. Straight. 2 straight. No meandering. No hesitation. Holt looked at me. He asked if we were going up. I said we had no choice. Rule 0. Violation again. Family overrides every protocol. Even when family is not present, duty fills in. Full blood. We ascended. By headlamp. Silence pulsed. Metal taste heavy. Breathing shallow. I whispered rule 2. Do not let separated party walk uphill alone. Holt nodded. We moved. In tandem. At the saddle. We heard breathing. Not ours. A man's. Slow. Steady. Controlled. He stepped into headlamp glow. Participant. Name was Raymond. Mid-50s. Former military. Fit. Calm. Too calm. He smiled. Hello. He asked if we wanted to see something interesting. His voice lacked warmth. Not hostile. Not afraid. Just flat. I asked what he saw. He said shapes. Upright. Watching. He said they were waiting for him. He said he felt chosen. Chosen is a concept humans impose on predation. Predators do not choose. They select based on vulnerability. I told him to walk down. He refused. He said he needed to go higher. He said higher was better. Higher is elevation. Elevation is agency. Above a threshold, the ridge consumes. Without constraint, Holt moved to block his path. Raymond was stronger. Then he looked. He shoved Holt aside. That was unusual. The ridge rarely uses physical force. Through mimics, it prefers consent. Raymond walked uphill, into tree line. Not running. Steady. Committed. Holt suggested we tackle him. I shook my head. Direct contact risks mimicry. I whispered Rule 7. Do not render assistance without confirming vitals. Confirming requires touch. Touch opens door. We followed. At distance, tree lines swallowed light. Shadows layered. Vertical shapes between trunks. Not branches. Not human. Raymond reached a clearing. He stopped. He tilted his head. The shapes tilted theirs. Synchrony. Like a ritual. Without sound. He spoke. Not to us. To them. He asked if he was ready. The shapes leaned forward. Snow bent upward. Under them. Instead of compressing. That defies physics. But physics is a local rule. The ridge predates local rules. Raymond's breath crystallized. Not normal condensation. The crystals hung. Stagnant. Like veils. Holt whispered. We needed to intervene. I said no. Intervention would kill us both. We waited. The shapes parted. Raymond walked between them. The forest closed. Snow fell. Then the ridge line receded. Birds returned. It was over. We returned to the vehicle. No Raymond. Administrative fiction. Missing. Possible suicide. Regional sealed. The pilot program documentation. That was the first public interface incident. After that, institutional denial became impossible. April brought the fire line test. The Regional Forest Service planned a control burn to clear deadfall near the fuel break. Cheap, efficient, good optics. Fire crews deployed. Meteorology approved. We knew fire would not cross the ridge line. The question was whether the ridge would cross the fire line. We observed from the lookout. Crew lit ignition strips. At 1000 hours, flames rose. Burn progressed. All normal. By 1200 hours, fire reached up a slope. It hit the ridge boundary. Flames bent upward again. Straight, as if a ceiling existed. Crew lead swore. He called it inversion. Inversion is atmospheric. This was vertical. Then the ridge responded. Silence dropped. Heavy. Not just absence of sound. Compression. Radios died. Not static. Dead. Holt gripped the rail. His knuckles white. I tasted metal. Almost electric. From the silent line, upright shapes emerged. Dark against flame. Flame did not touch them. They stepped with precision. Not retreating. Advancing. Toward the burn. Fire crews saw them. They froze. One firefighter whispered, "What the hell?" Another shouted, "Move." But nobody moved. Then the flames dropped. Not extinguished. Pulled down. Like they lost integrity. Like oxygen was taken away. By something that did not need it. Smoke twisted upward. then vanished midday. The shapes reached the fire line. They stopped. One leaned, investigating, like a scientist, studying an unfamiliar tool. It extended an arm. Long, thin, hand curved wrong. No palm, only fingers. It lowered the limb into glowing embers. Embers dimmed, not from cooling, from absence, as if consumed, without heat. Then the shape recoiled. Fast, not pain. Rejection. Fire is limitation. Fire rejects the ridge. The ridge cannot fully cross. Not yet. Shapes retreated. Flames resumed. Sound returned. Radios rebooted. Fire crews collapsed. One subbed. They filed a near-miss report. They cited sudden inversion threat. Administrative fiction. May is convened. A crisis meeting. Real crisis. Not paperwork crisis. He said we were beyond containment. We needed long-term plan. I asked what that meant. He said closure of district, evacuation of staff, transfer of jurisdiction to federal. I asked if federal knew. He said not officially. Official requires evidence. Evidence requires language. Language creates permission. While command argued. Structural responses. The ridge shifted tactics. It moved from isolation to communication. It used voices first, then names, then memories. The next step was dialogue. Late May. I was on night radio. I heard static, then breathing. Slow, measured, not human in rhythm. Too even. Then a voice. Female, middle-aged. She said my name. Perfectly. She asked if I was alone. I did not answer. Rule 1. Do not answer uphill voices. After dusk, radios count as uphill. When ridge pressure is present. She asked if I remembered the cabin. I did not. She described a cabin with red door. My family never owned a cabin. That was implanted memory. Would have been harmless, if not followed by what came next. She asked if I miss my mother. I froze. My mother died in 2016. Cancer. Peaceful. In hospice. The ridge should not know that, unless it listened. Through my calls, or through dreams, or through blood. I turned the radio off. I sat in silence. Silence pressed. My chest tightened. Not panic. Pressure. Then a whisper. Behind me. My name again. I turned. Empty. That was the test. If I turned before sunrise, permission would be given. I stayed still. At sunrise, weight lifted. The ridge retreated, but not far. The test had meaning. It wanted to engage, not just mimic. Engagement is escalation. Intelligent. Intentional. After that night, I requested rotation. Off nights. May is denied. He said I was too experienced. Experience becomes liability, not asset. June brought family pressure. My sister left a voicemail. She said Mom visited her. In a dream. She said Mom asked if I was coming home. She said Mom sounded young. Dreams are not neutral. The ridge reaches through grief. I called my sister. I asked if she was okay. She said yes. She said she only wanted to know if I would be home in August. She joked that I sounded like someone who had seen a ghost. I said I had not. Another lie. Institutional pressure escalated. Regional sent an investigator. Federal liaison. Legal background. First name Jenna. She asked for incident logs. Radio transcripts. Missing person reports. We handed over sanitized versions. She asked for raw recordings. Dispatch hesitated. She insisted. Authority attracts arrogance. The ridge enjoys arrogance. Jenna listened to recordings. She frowned. She paced. She said we were hiding something. She said numbers did not match bodies. She said we were negligent. We said nothing. Finally, she listened to the November radio bleed, the chant, the elevation requests. She replayed it 3 times. Her expression changed. Less skepticism, More concern. She asked what language it was. Mayes said, no known language. She asked if we had linguistic analysis. I said, we do not send this to linguists. She asked why. I said, because giving it language gives it permission. She stared at me for a long time. Then she asked for a field tour. Alone. With me. That was the next violation. Not ours. Hers. Curiosity. Authority. Combined. We rode at dawn. Ridgeline high. Birds loud. Coyotes restless. False stabilization. She asked about rule structure. I explained our 4 spoken rules and 3 implied. She asked why they were not in writing. I said, writing creates permanence. Permanence invites scrutiny. Scrutiny invites replication. We reached the saddle. Jenna scanned with binoculars. Ethics of observation. Fail above the ridge. Confirmation invites attention. She asked if we could go higher. I said no. She asked why. I said, the ridge decides when higher is allowed. She thought I was being metaphorical. Silence dropped. 5 seconds. Then 7. Then 10. Ridge close. Metal taste. Jenna's face paled. She lowered the binoculars. She whispered, what is that? I told her not to speak. She spoke louder. What is that? I grabbed her arm. We retreated. Silence held. Branches shifted. Upright shapes appeared. At perimeter. Not walking. Just appearing. 1. Then 2. Then 3. Jenna gasped. She stayed longer than 1 second. Rule 5 violation. Do not confirm. More than 1 upright. She froze. Eyes wide. Pupils dilating. I slapped her shoulder. Hard. Break fixation. She blinked. Shapes vanished. Silence remained. We moved downhill. At marker post. Sound returned. Jenna vomited. She wiped her mouth. She said she would recommend closure. She asked how many we had lost. I said, too many. She asked if the ridge ever crossed. I said, not fully. Fire stops it. Dawn slows it. That is its limitation. She nodded. 1 week later, federal issued closure. Temporary. Pending review. We evacuated cabins. Pack gear. Hold evidence. But closure does not erase presence. The ridge does not respect orders. It only respects limitations. Fire. Dawn. Rule structures. Emotional resistance. Family boundaries. What came next was not relief. It was pursuit. The ridge followed us. Into aftermath. I will continue. After the ridge followed me. To Boise. I understood that our jurisdiction had dissolved. We were no longer rangers defending topography. We were custodians of a rule set. The entity already understood better than we did. The geography was just the first medium. Memory was the second. Human networks, the third. Federal closure removed tourists and hikers. It removed the pretext of recreation, but it also removed structure. Structure is what keeps rules operational. Without structure, fear becomes superstition. Superstition opens doors. In early fall, Federal requested a final technical report. They wanted assets cataloged. They wanted incident timelines. They wanted recommendations. Stripped of mystique, I spent 6 weeks writing. Short sentences. Neutral language. No adjectives. That implies supernatural. I wrote things like voice contact probable, terrain-induced disorientation, non-lethal behavioral anomaly. Those phrases are self-deceit, but they protect the reader. Holt wrote a supplemental reflection. He described silence as operational absence. He described upright shapes as standing figures without confirmed gait. He described the entity as non-cooperative observer. Legal language cannot carry horror. It can only circle it. When reports were complete, Federal asked for a closure interview. Remote. Secure connection. 2 analysts. 1 psychologist. 1 linguist. A moderator. I did not see. They asked questions. Did you feel unsafe? Did you ever experience hallucinations? Do you consider these events pathological? I answered clinically. Rangers are trained to speak in procedure. Procedure is defensive language. Then the psychologist asked if we had ever heard our own names in absence of human presence. I said yes. She asked, how many times? I said, more than 10. She asked how I knew it was not stress. I said, stress does not learn my family history. She paused. Then she asked about dreams. I said nothing. Dreams are where the ridge is strongest now. Speaking dreams aloud gives it narrative. Narrative gives it road. They ended the interview early. They said Federal would follow up. They did not. That silence was deliberate. Government knows how to abandon quietly. Winter came again. Bitterroot closed. The ridge waited. I returned home to Missoula. I tried normal life. Groceries, bills, gym, movies. But normal life lacks ritual. Without ritual, memory loosens. The ridge hunts. Loose memory. The first sign it had followed was subtle. Heat lines above radiator. Pulsed in 3-beat cadence. That cadence matches the static pattern from closure night. I told myself it was coincidence. Coincidence is first line of denial. Second sign came in dreams. I dreamed of the meadow shelf, except the meadow was water. Birch dock extended into fog. Red door cabin on shore. My mother waved. She said, come quick before the light goes. But there was no sun, just ridge light. That pale false light that feels like dawn but has no warmth. Third sign came awake. Radio bleed from my neighbors. Police scanner. I heard elevation requests. Whispered non-English chant underneath. Scanner does not broadcast those frequencies unless those frequencies are not radio. I called Holt. He answered breathless. He said he heard voices through his shower vent. He said the vent smelled like pine. His apartment is in Spokane. No pine near him. He asked if we were infected. I said not infected. Contacted. He asked what we should do. I said rules still apply, even off ridge. He wrote them down. That was a mistake. We never write rules. Written rules become artifacts. Artifacts spread. 3 days later, he called again. He said his handwriting changed. He said the words slanted upward, as if climbing. He mailed me the paper. I burned it. Fire is limitation. Fire interrupts. Line of contact. February brought systemic failure. On civilian side, news reported missing persons uptick across 3 counties. Most hikers, some hunters, 1 snowshoer, all near mountains, all near ridge country. Local sheriffs blamed. Weather, poor preparation, administrative fiction. Scaled up. Regional asked us to consult unofficially. They held a roundtable. Borrowed classroom. At the university. 8 chairs. Coffee errands. Maps. A whiteboard. They asked if the Bitterroot closure created contagion. I said no. Contagion implies disease. Ridge is not disease. It is opportunity. It goes where rules break. One sheriff asked if they should ban hiking. I said banning invites defiance. Defiance is doorway. Instead we're recommended. Time restrictions. No ascent. After 2 in the afternoon. No ridge camping. No solo travel. They accepted. Quietly. Without press release. That is how institutional warnings move. Through absence. Of publicity. I asked. If any missing. Heard voices. Before vanishing. A deputy said. One mother reported. Her son hearing someone. Calling by name. From uphill. Another said. A boyfriend claimed. His partner chased a child. Into trees. Familiar patterns. Upright shapes. Child mimicry. Call and response. Holt asked. If anyone reported dreams. The room went still. One deputy nodded. His wife dreamed. Of a red door cabin. He thought. It was just grief. His son died. In a lake. 2 years prior. Grief. Is the ridge's second favorite entry point. After compassion. We left the meeting. Without recommendations. The law could enforce. Law needs. Definable harms. The ridge. Offers ambiguity. By spring. My sister started. Sleepwalking. She was found. On her balcony. At 2 in the morning. Staring north. She said. She heard someone calling. From a tree line. There is no tree line. In Boise suburbia. But direction matters. North. Is Bitterroot. I stayed with her. For a month. Every night. She woke at 3. 3-beat pattern. Again. She said. Something was waiting. She said. Mom was there. She said. We had been gone. Too long. I recited Rule 4. Each night. If it calls your name. Keep walking. Until sunrise. Sleepwalking. Is form of walking. I guided her. Back to bed. I turned on lights. At sunrise. Lights simulate dawn. Dawn. Is limitation. One night. She asked a new question. She asked. If we forgot the cabin. She described the dock. The peeling paint. The way the lake. Reflected sky. Even when sky was dark. That detail matters. Reflection. Without illumination. Is ridge light. I told her. That cabin does not exist. She insisted it did. She insisted. We slept there as kids. We did not. Ridge insults. Counterfeit memory. To bypass skepticism. If memory carries. Emotional weight. Rules fail. On the 22nd of May. Holt called. His voice thin. He said. He was driving. He said. The ridge wanted him. To go to the lookout. That word matters. Lookout. Place of observation. I asked where he was. He said. He was already at the gate. I told him. To stay in the truck. Keep engine running. Describe nothing. He said. The gate was gone. I said. Gates do not disappear. He said. Maybe we removed it. We did not. He said. The trees were different. Taller. Straighter. Too straight. For random growth. Straight means mapped. Map means claimed. I asked. If he saw upright shapes. He said no. I asked. If he heard silence. He paused. Silence. Is its own answer. I told him. To leave immediately. Turn around. Drive without stopping. Do not look back. Do not listen. If he heard his name. Accelerate. If he saw a child. Honk horn. Horn. Is artificial sound. Artificial sound. Disrupts ridge cadence. He hung up. 10 minutes passed. He texted. One word. Cabin. Then nothing. I drove to Bitterroot. That night. Uniform unnecessary. Duty personal. At the fence. The gate was chained. Just as we left it. Snow thin. Air cold. No tracks. No tire marks. No sign of Holt. No sign of anyone. Silence low. Present. I stayed. Until sunrise. No contact. No shapes. No voices. At 9. I called the sheriff. Holt was listed missing. In Spokane. His vehicle found. At a gas station. 2 miles. From his apartment. Keys in seat. Tank full. No signs of travel. No signs of departure. His sister called me. The next day. She said. Holt visited her. In a dream. He said. He was on the dock. He said. It was peaceful. Peaceful. Is ridge speak. Force surrendered. Institutional containment. Had failed. Personal containment. Failing. That left. Only rule changes. Rules must evolve. When environment changes. I rewrote the 7 spoken rules. In my head. Not on paper. Never on paper. Rule 8. Do not dream. With nostalgia. Rule 9. Do not write the rules. Rule 10. Do not follow the dead when they speak. In present tense. Whether those rules work remains untested. The ridge interacts with intention, not compliance. June 13th. Rain. My sister called. At midnight. She whispered, "It is outside." I asked what it was. She said, "The cabin." I drove. Without thinking. Her apartment lights were off. Curtains open. She stood barefoot on carpet, staring at balcony door. I entered slowly. She did not turn. I asked what she saw. She whispered, "They are waving." I looked at the glass. Nothing but the reflection on the glass was wrong. Trees, birch, water, dock, red door. None of those existed. Outside, they existed. Behind reflection, the ridge used glass. The way it used elevation as threshold. She said, Mom was on the dock. She said, Mom wanted us to come home. Home is weapon. I whispered rule 3. Do not acknowledge anything upright. She placed her hand on the glass. Reflection hand met hers, but the angle was wrong. Not mirror. Invitation. I pulled her back. She screamed. She shouted that I was hurting her. She punched my chest. She cried. Her grief raw. The ridge slipped through grief, like fish through water. I held her until sunrise. At sunrise, reflection dissolved. Glass showed only parking lot. She collapsed. She sobbed. She begged me to bring Mom back. I said, Mom was gone. She said, Mom was right there. I drove her to hospital, not psychiatric, medical. She needed electrolyte. She needed sleep. She needed distance from glass. She asked if she was insane. I said no. I said insanity is when reality breaks. Here reality held. It was just shared with something older. Next day, she did not remember the dock. She did not remember Mom. She remembered screaming. She remembered cold. That amnesia is protective. Ridge interaction sometimes erases short term, not out of mercy, out of calibration. I researched historical accounts, old ranger logs, 1960s, unofficial. One entry described upright men on ridge who sang without mouths. Another from 1932 mentioned children without tracks, following hunters. Indigenous oral histories referenced watches above tree line who mimic grief. Different names, same behaviors, no resolution, only avoidance. Avoidance lasts centuries until someone breaks structure. Federal containment considered second phase. Research, electromagnetic scans, ground penetrating radar, linguistic analysis. They would fail. Analytical frameworks cannot interpret mythic phenomena. Mythic here does not mean legendary. Mythic means persistent. Outside linear time. July closed with 3 more disappearances across state lines. Idaho, Wyoming, British Columbia, all alpine, all with reports of voices, all with reports of children in wilderness where no children belong. Spread confirmed. I contacted Jenna. She answered. After 4 rings. She sounded tired. She said she had been reassigned. Wildfire oversight team. I asked if she still believed closure was sufficient. She said closure was naive. She asked if we had any new rules. I recited rules 8 through 10. She wrote them. I told her not to. Too late. She said writing was necessary for policy. Policy requires text. I warned her. That written rules. Spread the ridge. She asked how. I said, rule is form of description. Ridge uses description. Like trail markers. She fell silent. The next week, she emailed me. A draft. Federal mitigation plan. It contained our rules. Sanitized. But present. I deleted the email. I burned the printed draft. Fire is limitation. The ridge cannot cross flame. It cannot operate. When smoke obscures. Line of sight. It cannot speak. At full volume. At dawn. Those are limitations. Limitations imply physicality. Physicality implies presence. Presence implies negotiation. That was my final error. I believed negotiation possible. I returned once more. To Bitterroot. Late summer. Alone. I went at dawn. I carried flare pack. I carried no radio. No camera. Cameras invite confirmation. I stopped. At the closure fence. I spoke aloud. Not to entity. To A. I said, we cannot contain you. I said, we cannot map you. I said, we cannot teach civilians. Your rules. I did not expect response. The ridge is not God. It is not demon. It is not spirit. It is ecology. Ecologies do not answer. But silence answered. Deep. Total. Then a voice. My mother's. Perfect. She said. My childhood nickname. She asked if I wanted to come home. I whispered Rule 10. Do not follow the dead. When they speak. In present tense. I turned. I walked to truck. I did not look back. If I had. Permission. Would have been granted. The Bitterroot Range. Is closed on maps. But open. In memory. Wilderness. Has always been two places. The physical ground. And the mental corridor. Where we decide. What we believe. Is allowed to exist. When federal shut. The district gate. They only closed. The first. The ridge had already moved. Into the second. After that last dawn. I left Montana. With no forward plan. I drove south. Through Idaho. Through Nevada. Until the mountains. Sank behind desert. And the sky widened. Into something. Without corners. I thought distance. Could dilute contact. But distance. Only diluted context. The ridge does not require proximity. It requires invitation. I rented a small room. Foothills. Outside Reno. Dry country. No pine. No snow line. No uplifts. 4 voices to climb. Nights held. Only crickets. Dust wind. I slept 3 days. Without dreams. That was the longest reprieve. Since closure. Reprieve. Is not escape. Reprieve. Is reconnaissance. From the other side. On the 4th night. I dreamed of Sarah. On the saddle. Same as before. Except she was not smoking. She was kneeling. Snow fell upward. She looked at me. She mouthed something. No sound. Then she stood. Upright. Too upright. Head tilted. Eyes black. That was not dream. That was rehearsal. I woke sweating. Mouth dry. Metallic taste. I opened the blinds. Dawn light. Normal. Ordinary. Not ridge light. That distinction matters. Ridge light looks like dawn. But lacks warmth. Ordinary dawn. Carries heat. Heat carries animal life. For 2 weeks. Nothing happened. No dreams. No voices. No reflection distortions. I let normal life reattach to bone. I taught myself that the ridge was bounded by topography, by grief, and that distance mattered. That was self-deception. Deception is not failure. Deception is coping. Then I received mail. Not letter. Package. No return address. Postmark. From Helena. Inside. A single item. Wrapped in wax paper. A trail photo. From our first season. Before the ridge. Moved down. Printed on glossy paper. 10 years old. In the background. Tree line. Above tree line. 3 upright shapes. Barely visible. Blurred. Should have been unnoticed. But now I saw them. Perfect alignment. Tilting in sync. Under the photo. A note. Block letters. Not handwriting. I recognized. It read, "Elevation is not geography." I burned both. Fire consumed quickly. Soot lifted. Smoke curled. Ridge cannot cross smoke. For a moment, I felt safe. Safety is a transient hallucination. Next day, I bought a notebook. I did not write rules. Writing rules violates Rule 9. Instead, I wrote losses. One name per page. Pages filled. Some pages blank. Blank pages felt heavier than written ones. Because blank meant there were more names coming. I added my sister's name on a blank page. Not because she was gone, but because she was marked. Marking is precaution. It reminds me that compassion can convert to violation with one call. In the night, my sister phoned. On a Sunday, noon, bright, safe hour. She sounded cheerful. She asked if I could visit in August. She said she wanted to go camping. She laughed. She said she missed mountains. She said there was a lake she wanted to see. She said the dock had been restored. Those words collapsed. The distance between belief and fear. There is no lake with dock in Boise. There is no cabin with red door. There is only reflection, nostalgia, invitation. I told her no. I told her mountains were dangerous. She laughed. She said I was still thinking. Like a ranger. I said I was thinking. Like a survivor. She paused. Silence briefly. Touched the line. Not ridge silence. Awkward. Human silence. She apologized. She said she just missed Mom. That is how it begins. I drove to Boise. The same week. She answered the door. Barefoot. She hugged me. Warm. Human. No tilt. That mattered. We talked. She cooked. She asked nothing about the ridge. She asked nothing about dreams. She asked nothing about closure. For 48 hours, we lived as if cosmic predation did not exist. That illusion is the most painful part of aftermath. Life continues, but it continues with something watching from the corner of reflection. On the third night, she woke again, stood at balcony, hand on glass, whispered. I approached slowly. I asked who she was talking to. She said nobody. She said she was listening. Listening is first surrender. Hearing is passive. Listening is active. Listening allows formation. I whispered Rule 8. Do not dream. With nostalgia. She did not hear me. Her breath fogged glass. She said she wanted to remember the lake. I reached for her arm. She toned. Her eyes clay. She whispered, it is not just mine. It wants you to. That sentence contains the true escalation. The ridge does not target individuals. It targets networks, family, colleagues, dependents, duty chains, emotional chains, institution chains, anything that binds one mind to another. At sunrise, she slept. I packed. I drove. Not away. Toward Bitterroot. I had no plan. Plan implies strategy. Strategy implies chess. The ridge does not play chess. It plays erosion. It waits. It makes you choose. Crossing the Montana line felt like crossing into a story already in progress. Pines thickened. Snow lingered in shadows. Though it was August. Weather at wrong elevation. Ridge signature. District office remained shuttered. Federal notices posted. No entry. No access. I parked anyway. I walked the service road. Up to the closure fence. Mist pooled. Along the saddle. Birds silent. Pressure low. Silence held. 10 seconds. Then 15. The ridge was awake. Not hunting. Listening. I spoke aloud. Not in challenge. In record. I said my name. I said my title. I said my years. I said my jurisdiction, confession, is ritual. Ritual creates context. Context creates choice. I told the ridge. It had already won. Not optimism. Observation. Institutions failed. Families compromised. Dreams infiltrated. Containment collapsed. Victory is not consumption. Victory is inevitability. Silence deepened. Then a voice. From tree line. My mother. Asking if I was tired. Asking if I wanted to rest. Then sour. Asking if I wanted a cigarette. Then Holt. Asking if we were safe now. Then children. Asking if we remembered. The flowers. Voices led. Not harmonized. Not chaotic. Parallel. Like a choir. Practicing individually. Upright shapes appeared. At ridge. Dozens. Perfect still. Heads tilted. As before. But something changed. Their tilt was not invitation. It was observation. Study. Evaluation. I said one sentence. I had never allowed myself to say. I said, I'm not coming up. That sentence is choice. Choice is resistance. Resistance is rule. The ridge reacted. Silence compressed. Shapes leaned. Voices paused. Then one voice. Childlike. Not the ones from November. Higher. Clearer. Asking one question. Why? That question matters. Entities rarely ask why. Why implies curiosity. Curiosity implies learning. Learning implies future. I answered. 5 words. Because there are still rules. The ridge does not kill. Without lesson. The lesson was that refusing invitation is not denial. It is defiance. And defiance slows erosion. Erosion slowed is survival. Not victory. Never victory. Upright shapes dissolved into mist. Voices receded. Silence loosened. Dawnlight warmed. Real warmth. Not ridge warmth. I toned. I walked back to truck. I did not look behind. Looking behind. Converts exit to pursuit. I drove to Missoula. I showered. I slept. Dreams returned. But they were my dreams. Not imported. Different content. No cabin. No lake. No mother. Just empty trails. And healthy birds. That absence felt more real than any presence. After a week, my sister called. She said, the dreams stopped. She asked if I did something. I said, I reminded it of the rules. She did not ask what that meant. She did not need to. Federal never reopened. The district, Bitterroot Range, remains closed. By quiet designation. Maps say rehabilitation. Environmental recovery. Administrative fiction. Locals say it is haunted. Folklore is crude containment. As long as people avoid, rules hold. Tourists still drive. They look at the ridge. They take photos. They post online. They ask why it is closed. They make jokes. Humor is denial. Denial is early containment. They do not hear voices. They do not see shapes. The ridge is patient. It does not hunt the ignorant first. It hunts the obligated. I keep my uniform folded in a box. I keep my flare kit in my truck. I keep my rules in my head. Not on paper. Never on paper. Sometimes I hear static through walls. Free beats. Pause. Free beats. Pause. The rhythm of attention. If I ignore it, it stops. If I listen, it asks. If I answer, it invites. Invitations are never rescinded. There is something I need to say directly, because this is where confession ends and warning begins. The ridge was not about terrain. Terrain was just the first battleground. The entity preys on human rules, on compassion, on duty, on memory, on grief, on curiosity, on everything we use to justify staying alive. With each other, we built institutions to protect people from weather, from predators, from carelessness, but we never considered predators that adapt faster than our policies and exploit the exact instincts we are trained to honor. I work in places where rules exist, not to prevent accidents, but to contain something that preys on human behavior. If you are listening, assume you are already within jurisdiction. Jurisdiction does not mean Montana. Jurisdiction means proximity to loss. If you have heard your name from the wrong direction, follow Rule 1. Do not answer if someone you love asks you to follow uphill. Follow Rule 2. Do not let separated parties walk alone. If you see something upright where no upright belongs, follow Rule 3. Do not acknowledge if it knows your private name. Follow Rule 4. Keep walking until sunrise. And if sunrise does not come, produce flame. Flame is limitation. Flame is boundary. Understand this. Rules are not victory. Rules are postponement. Postponement is survival. That is all we ever had. You want to know if the ridge can be stopped. It cannot. You want to know if it can be outrun. It cannot. You want to know if it will come for you. It already has. If you care enough to listen, you are already interacting. Curiosity is permission. I did not speak to clear conscience. Conscience cannot be cleared. I spoke because institutional containment failed and personal containment is collapsing, and somebody needs to hold the rules long enough for the next authority to inherit them, even if that authority is you. If you dream of a lake and a dock and a red door and someone you miss standing upright and waving you closer, wake yourself or wait for dawn. Do not approach. Do not speak. Do not remember fondly. Nostalgia is the fastest corridor. If you hear a child laughing in timber where no children play, hold position. Wait for birds. Birds confirm the world is still operating under our rules. When birds stop, silence begins. And when silence begins, the ridge is listening. I survived. That is not triumph. That is the burden. Survival means I know the rules. And know that rules only delay consequences. If you carry anything from this, carry this. There is no victory. There is only postponement. And postponement is enough for now. Enough to warn. Enough to pass the burden. Enough to keep the ridge waiting. One more season. One more dawn. One more voice. Unacknowledged. Do not answer. Do not follow. Do not acknowledge. Keep walking until sunrise. You will not escape, but you might delay. And delay is survival. For now.